What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another World Cup 2022 fantasy video, and in this one it's the Matchday 2 preview. So I'm going to go through some of the hot topics and questions that you've put to me, whether or not we should be moving the armband in Matchday 1, which teams to target in Matchday 2, all that kind of good stuff. I'm also going to talk about the actual game itself, how the rules have been changed halfway through Matchday 1, loads of stuff is still broken, and all that kind of stuff as well. So if you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like. If you haven't done so already, hit that subscribe button and let's jump into it. So when I do a game week preview video for Fantasy Premier League, I would say a lot of the questions are along the lines of, who should I captain this week? I've got this player and I want to bring in that player. Is that a good move? I've got 8 million to spend on a forward. Who should I be looking at? Who's the best option? Etc. Right? When I put the tweet out for the Matchday 2 preview video for the World Cup, i.e. this video, I would say about 50% of the responses were just about how the game is broken. I've got this player. Why have they not been given this amount of points? How do transfers work? Will the wildcard hack still work? And all that kind of stuff. This is just an example of one of the questions I got. Do we get points for key passes, tackles and shots on target? Why do goals conceded deductions not work? Another example, Theo Hernandez last night against Australia. I think he came on around the 15th minute. He played them the whole game, so he reached 60 minutes. He didn't concede a goal while he was on the pitch, and at the time recording, he has not had a clean sheet added to his points total. I think Lionel Messi's had at least 2 shots on target, I believe, and should have had 1 extra point. Giroud, I don't think, had a plus 1 point for 2 shots on target. He scored 2 goals, so they must have been on target. I just don't get it right, and it is just kind of completely broken. And the fact that they've changed some of the rules halfway through is just crazy. So if we have a quick look, so appearance points are still +1. I think goalkeeper clean sheets were +6, I feel like, before the tournament started. I could be wrong. And they also had to play 70 minutes or more. That's now been changed to 60 minutes or more. It's the same as defenders. That is also +5. So I guess that's to put them on a par. Midfielders have also been changed. So as far as I know, no midfielder yet has been given points for tackles or key passes. Now, I'll be honest, I haven't gone and checked whether any midfielders so far in the World Cup have got at least 3 tackles in a game or at least 2 key passes. I'd be surprised if they haven't, though. And apparently, from what people are saying, no points have been awarded. It's now +7, apparently, for a goal scored instead of +5. And that's literally been changed halfway through. And they've retroactively gone and changed the points. Like, the game is just a mess. And I'm going to be honest with you, right? I know people keep coming to me with these questions because I make videos, and before the tournament started, obviously I was in touch with someone working on the game trying to clarify all the rules, but I'm just not that bothered about continually going back and forth with the game developer to try and figure all this stuff out. Like, it's the World Cup. I'm trying to enjoy it. I'm making a few videos along the way. I just don't want to spend my time trying to figure out what rules are going to change next, what rules are correct, when the points will be updated. I just don't want to do that. So the honest answer is, I don't have an answer to your questions. The game is an absolute mess. I tweeted about that 4 days ago, and I tweeted this morning to say, in some ways, it's even more of a mess now than when we originally started building our teams. So the way that I am approaching it is I'm just picking my players as normal. Yes, of course, we could now look at midfielders more because if they score a goal, they get 7 points instead of forwards, which is +5. But it's not going to change my strategy a huge amount. This is a very short tournament. Obviously, you've only got kind of 7 match days, then it's done. Your rank doesn't get held on your account, so when the next World Cup comes or the Euro game, you're not even going to remember, unless you track it somewhere, where you finished. I would try and enjoy it, and that's how I approach this. Like, when I play Fantasy Premier League, FPL, of course I enjoy it, but I know my overall rank history will get saved at the end. So I do play in a certain way. And sometimes I don't make that fun pick because I don't want to be punished too heavily, or I know it in deep down it's not the correct call. But going into match day 2, I'm trying to remind myself this is supposed to be just a little bit of fun during the World Cup. I'm not watching World Cup matches worried really about what my fantasy team is doing. I'm just able to switch off a bit more than when it comes to the Premier League. So as an example, I'm telling myself now for match day 2, if England are in the tournament, I want 3 England players as much as I can. If Harry Maguire's fit, I want him in my team. I want to see him get that goal. And that's the kind of player I just cannot pick in Premier League. So that's how I'm approaching it. And like, I know people, like I said, they keep DMing me, they keep replying to my tweets, asking me about how this works, why isn't this working like that? The honest answer is I don't know, and I'm not sure I care enough about the game to go and try and find out, because it is just such a mess. So my only advice is just try and enjoy it. Don't worry too much about how much of a mess it is. It's supposed to be a little bit of fun. It's not ideal. Maybe we should have all gone and played different World Cup fantasy games. It's just how I feel at the moment about it. And look, Premier League will be back in a month or so, and we can just concentrate on that, which is obviously, as much as we complain about that game, it's much better run than how this is. So hopefully that sounds alright. I know a lot of people want me to go and find this stuff out, but it's just a lot of added time for something that could just change later on. So do I know why all this stuff is broken? No. Do I know if it will get fixed or changed? Absolutely not. Let's just try and enjoy it as we go. So with all that being said, we can now start to look ahead to match day 2. And a lot of you asked me about which teams to target. That coincides with which players to bring into our squads as well. And obviously every single day when we watch more and more matches, we're getting more information in terms of who might be nailed, who started, who didn't, which teams look good, which teams look bad, etc. So on my wildcard draft yesterday, for example, I picked Kazri. He didn't start for Tunisia. I picked Telles. He's predicted not to start for Brazil. I didn't have any French players, but now Theo Hernandez is going to be absolutely nailed on at left back, very attacking because his brother is out for the whole tournament. I think he's out for the whole season, so it's a real bad one for him. Hopefully he kind of recovers from that okay. But there's all this stuff we're taking in each day. But even if you don't have in-depth knowledge about every single team, which I definitely don't, and you're unsure about who are the favourites and stuff like that, you can use a resource like 538, and I'll try and put a link down in the description below, which is essentially a prediction model. It'll tell you what percentage a team has of winning the whole thing, getting to the semi-finals, get into the quarterfinals, etc. But it also does it on a match-by-match basis. So I tend to have a quick look at this and see which teams have got the biggest percentage chance to win each game, and then they are likely to be the teams that you want to focus most of your players on. So as an example, and I'm not going to run through every single team in depth, but if you look at Wales versus Iran, it's quite close in terms of who might win or whether or not it'll be a draw. And I don't think either of those teams have got so many standout players that we need to even look at that, because it's not really sure how that game will go. It could be a close one, etc. So I probably won't look to target any players from that team. But when I look at Senegal versus Qatar, and I spoke about the Senegal defence yesterday, they are quite strong favourites to win that game, and they've got a lot of cheap defenders. Not Koulibaly or Mendy in goal, but they've got other defenders that are 4 million and 4.5 million, which I discussed yesterday, like Cisse, Sabali as well, I think was one of them. So you could look at them if you need cheap defenders, if you want to spend more money in other spots in your defence or in your midfield or your forwards. Then it's like Netherlands and Ecuador. Now, I thought Ecuador were pretty good against Qatar, and obviously I can take that into account when I'm making my decisions. But Netherlands are still strong favourites for that game. And depending on how you're going to set your team up, if you want to spend a bit more money in midfield now, for example, you might not be able to have 3 heavy-hitting forwards. So if you need someone that's slightly cheaper, Memphis Depay should be okay now. He came on in match day 1. Hopefully he'll be okay for match day 2. The Netherlands lineup usually does leak on Twitter before the deadline. He could be an option of 8.5 million. I still like Dumfries at 6 million. If you want to spend that much on a defender spot, he's very attacking. So they look like a good team to kind of go for. England as well, and I spoke about this yesterday, right? People find it really hard to accept, but England are quite good, right? And they are strong favourites for that USA game. Yes, it's going to be more difficult than the Iran game. Yes, I'm not 100% sure about our defence, because I think USA will press us a lot more and cause us problems. But England should win that game. And obviously, when we talk about taking in new information, Harry Kane is getting a scan on his ankle actually today at the time of kind of record, not necessarily at the exact time, but basically I've not seen the results of that scan yet. So if Harry Kane wasn't able to play in match day 2 and you're only looking for a 1-week punt, then you could look at someone like Callum Wilson, for example, because he will almost certainly play instead. I don't think they would play a false 9 or something like that, and he's only 7 million. So suddenly, I guess England's chances of winning go down a little bit because Kane's not playing, but they should still create quite a few chances. So Callum Wilson for 7 million suddenly seems like quite a fun 1-week punt. I still think you can look at their defence, because England defence is generally quite good. And yes, they conceded 2 goals. But I think some of that was maybe a lapse in concentration because the game was just going so well. Should it have been a penalty? You let me know. Harry Maguire should have definitely got one. Tunisia and Australia is kind of close. I probably wouldn't look at anyone there. Poland maybe are favourites against Saudi Arabia. But I've got to be honest, Saudi Arabia were full of energy against Argentina. If they can play like that again, they will cause Poland problems. So Lewandowski obviously missed a penalty. That would have been his first World Cup goal, I think. Not ideal. He's 10 million, but I'm already looking at it thinking I should probably just spend the extra 0.5 and get Neymar. I just don't think it's worth going for Lewandowski, so I'll probably skip that. We knew France were good anyway. I think sometimes you need that reminder, like against Australia, to just see how good they are. But also Denmark just weren't great against Tunisia, and I just think it's now. And I said yesterday I wasn't going to go for any. I think it's crazy now not to go without any French players. So I think I would definitely look at Theo Hernandez. Giroud is definitely a cheap option up front. I spoke about him for Matchday 1. And obviously Mbappe, if you've got the cash. Like, I think some people said he didn't look great, and I can kind of see that to some extent, but he didn't look great and he's still got 2 returns. What's going to happen when he's absolutely on it, when he puts all those chances away? There's big scores coming. So I think Theo Hernandez, Giroud and Mbappe in particular look good. Argentina still very strong favourites against Mexico. I think, look, don't take anything away from Saudi Arabia. They took risks with their high defensive line. They played really well, like I said, full of energy. But there were some very tight offside calls. And I'm not saying they were wrong. I'm just saying if Argentina had timed it even like a second or 2 seconds better, they would have scored like 2 or 3 goals in that game. Suddenly the whole outlook of the game changes. And suddenly we really want Argentina players again. So I'm not saying you need like the triple up. Right, I'm not saying you absolutely need a defender, but I still think Lionel Messi looks like a good option. Rodrigo de Paul for 5 million should play most games. There's still options you could look at. I know this section's taken quite a lot, but there's obviously a lot of teams to talk through. These teams here, I've not seen them play yet at the time of recording. I do know that Sosa has started for Croatia, so they're pretty good favourites against Canada. He's a good defender option for 3.5 million. One thing that interested me is Belgium versus Morocco. I think I look at that Belgian team and think it's excellent. Obviously, we know De Bruyne is brilliant, etc., but they are possibly going to be missing players like Lukaku, and maybe Morocco are a bit stronger than I kind of realise, right? Obviously, they got Hakimi, etc. We'll see how they do against Croatia. It might not be worth targeting too many Belgian players unless you really want De Bruyne because of the new rules. Apparently, the new rules around midfielders get an extra point for a goal. The one that kind of interests me there is if I don't want Di Maria for 8.5, could Eden Hazard be an option for 8 million instead? Will he get enough minutes? We'll have to look at that. There's obviously Meunier kind of in the wing-back system. Could look at him. Japan, I'm not sure in that game. Costa Rica, I think we can probably ignore it. Spain versus Germany is a bit different to France versus Denmark. I will almost certainly ignore Spain versus Germany. Possibly if there's like some cheap midfielders or something like that look like options, because obviously Sané is injured, so Musiala might play in that first game in Matchday 1. And if Sané is still out, he might be a good option for 8 million. But ultimately, I think I'll probably ignore that because it's just too close to call. Serbia could have options there. We'll have to see if Mitrovic is fit. Vlahovic as well is an option there, so we could look at that. South Korea against Ghana, their favourites. Maybe Heung-min Son if you need a cheap forward. Brazil, I think this is the one that interested me the most. And maybe I'm underestimating just how... I mean, Brazil were my favourites for the tournament, like a lot of people. But they are the strongest favourites out of all the matches in Matchday 2 to win their game. And I think I've got to put Neymar in, and I think I've got to possibly consider one of their defenders as well. So if Sandro starts, he could be a cheap left-back if you want to risk, because they could rotate, right? Tellez could start the second game. Paqueta looks like he's going to start as well. He could be a cheap midfield option. Neymar himself, Richarlison is also predicted to start. He's a very cheap forward. He could be an option as well. So Brazil are someone that I definitely want to target, and I didn't have enough players in my wildcard. So I think them and France is who I need to change a little bit. And then Portugal and Uruguay. Portugal are strong favourites, so we'll see how well they do in the first game, how they're looking. Obviously, Ronaldo now left Man United, etc. So they could be, Cancelo, for example, might still be an option. But let's see how well Uruguay do first, because the likes of Nunez could cause them some problems. I think Spain and Germany is very close. I probably ignore that. Portugal and Uruguay, in my eyes, it's maybe a little bit closer than what they're set. I mean, I'm just an idiot with a webcam doing YouTube videos, right? They've got a whole prediction model, but I'm not sure I want to target that game. But I think Brazil and France, I've got to change my mind on a little bit. So I think a forward line of Messi, Neymar and Mbappe could still be a great option if you can afford it. So that's team to targets and a little bit of talk about players. Obviously, there's a lot of teams to go for. I can't go through every single one in depth, but let me know if there's anything you disagree with, or if there's any players you think we should be looking at that I haven't mentioned in the comments below. All right, what are my thoughts on saving the wildcard for the quarterfinals so you can prepare fully for the quarterfinals and the semi-finals? So it's probably worth doing a quick reminder about how the wildcard is supposed to be able to work. So let's use Matchday 2 as an example. So if I wildcard in Matchday 2, I can make unlimited free transfers up until the first kickoff, but also during Matchday 2 as well. So just remember, the Matchday 2 starts as soon as Matchday 1 ends, and Matchday 2 doesn't end until the final game has been played. And your wildcard runs throughout that. So you can change your team up until the first kickoff. And then if you see a lineup comes out and you have got a player that's not starting, you can use your unlimited free transfers to transfer that player out to another player that hasn't played in Matchday 2 and get their points instead, because the one you originally picked hasn't started. The key thing is you can also transfer out locked players to get players that you want from Matchday 3 instead. So as an example, if I've got Mbappe in my Matchday 2 team and he plays against Denmark, let's say he gets 10 points, happy days. I keep those points, he's locked in my team. But because my wildcard is still active until Matchday 2 ends, I can remove him for free and get Harry Kane in, who's maybe a player that I want in Matchday 3 instead. Now, I won't get Kane's points for Matchday 2, but he will be in my team for Matchday 3. So any players you don't want on your Matchday 2 wildcard in Matchday 3, when they're locked, you can transfer them out for a player you do want, and they'll be in your team for Matchday 3. So that's how it's supposed to work. Now, in round of 16, you get unlimited free transfers, so you don't need to use your wild card. You could use it in Matchday 3, so that for any rotation, you can react to the lineups, but I don't think that outweighs the benefit of having a completely fresh team for Matchday 2 and for Matchday 3. And remember, you're going to get a couple of transfers in Matchday 3 anyway. So if there are a couple of players that don't start, you've still got some transfers to deal with them. So I think the wildcard's got to be used in Matchday 2 or in the quarterfinals. There's no point in saving it till the semi-finals or the finals. Too late into the tournament. Now, to come back to the question, now I've given the reminder, I'm almost certainly going to use it in Matchday 2. And the reason is there's more weaker teams left in the tournament. The theory is that as we get into the latter stages, the stronger teams will be involved. So obviously, they're probably some of the teams that have got some of the best attacks, but we're also going to have a lot of teams that have got, you know, really good defenses as well. So you're unlikely to get as many big scoring games. Like we've already seen France score 4, England score 6 in the group stages. I'm sure we'll see some other results like that. And it's not that they can't happen in the latter stages, it's just less likely to happen. So that's what I will use it in Matchday 2. The reason that people think about using it in the quarterfinals is in case they mess up in the round of 16, or if there's just some big upsets. Okay, so if we come over to the rules, we get unlimited free transfers in the round of 16. So we are still going to be targeting players from teams that we think are going to do really well, not only because we want points in the round of 16, but also we want those teams and those players in the quarterfinals. So let's say England, France, Netherlands, Portugal, those 4 teams all get to the round of 16, and you get 3 players from each of those teams. So you've got 12 of your squad are from the Netherlands, Portugal, England and France. But what happens if France, England and Portugal happen to get knocked out in the round of 16? It's unlikely, I know, but it could happen, right? If that happens, you've then only got however many transfers, so 5 for the quarterfinals to deal with that, but you've got 9 players to sort out. There might be injuries, suspensions, there might be other teams that get knocked out that you weren't expecting. That is why some people like to save it for the quarterfinals. What I would argue is it's unlikely to happen, right? So if France and England, etc., get to the round of 16, you'd expect them to probably go through, so you can mostly safely target those players. You also get 4 transfers in the round of 16, which you could use on locked players, I believe, and you've still got 5 to deal with the quarterfinals anyway. That feels like enough. You'd have to get it absolutely wrong to have like a really weak squad. Like, of course, loads of teams could get knocked out you weren't expecting, and you could get loads of injuries, and that would really suck. You wouldn't have enough transfers, but at that point, you would just take the points hit. So for me, and I am a bit biased because this was going to be my strategy all along, I'm going to use it in Matchday 2. My thoughts are quarterfinals is the only other time really to use it, but I don't think it's as beneficial. And honestly, you should have already decided this, because if you're going to potentially wildcard in quarterfinals, then you probably should have set your team up in match day 1 so that it's also good for match day 2. A lot of us who had already decided to wildcard in match day 2 set up our match day 1 squads a bit different for players that we don't necessarily want to carry through. But ultimately, that is my thoughts. I'm going to use it in match day 2. Quarterfinals isn't a bad shout. I just feel like you can get it right in the round of 16 and you've got enough transfers to deal with it afterwards. Alright, so who are the best captain picks for match day 2? If we're not talking about differentials or anything like that, we're just talking about the standout best picks, and bear in mind we only get 2 each match day, it probably just is similar players who are great options in match day 1, the likes of Mbappe, Messi and Neymar. I don't see too many reasons to think outside the box. I know a lot of people went for Enner Valencia, for example, on the opening day, got 2 goals, absolutely fair play, but I don't think there's much reason to look past these kind of players. And I know Argentina didn't do that well against Saudi Arabia, for example, but as we discussed earlier with the 538 predictions, they're still strong favourites for that Mexico game. Neymar and Brazil are massive favourites for the game against Switzerland, and we know that France are always going to be a strong side. So they're the players that I would probably look at, right? You don't need me to tell you that. But when we look at the fixtures that are coming up, I'm not really seeing too many other standout picks. Maybe Depay against Ecuador, possibly. Maybe an England player is a differential against USA. I think because of how well they did against Iran, a lot of people will pick England players. I'm not sure they'll necessarily be looking at them as a captain, right? A lot of people aren't going to own Sterling. They're probably not going to captain Saka necessarily. Kane might be injured, etc. And I think, look, there's teams that could do well. Tunisia could do well against Australia. Lewandowski maybe against Saudi Arabia. Possibly even like the Saudi Arabia players against Poland. But I don't think they're necessarily captain options. So unless you want to back like De Bruyne against Morocco, for example, or maybe, I don't know, Son against Ghana or Ronaldo against Uruguay, I'm not seeing a huge amount of standout picks. So I will almost certainly just try and get at least 2 of these 3 in, if not all 3, and then just pick my captains as I go, right? I think there's penalties on. I'm not actually sure on France who's the penalty taker. I think it was Griezmann before, so he might be ahead of Mbappe. Obviously, Messi's the penalty taker for Argentina. I'm going to assume that Neymar is the penalty taker for Brazil, so that always helps as well. But ultimately, even if they don't get penalties, there's loads of avenues for points for them, and I don't think the new midfield score for goals, like the +7, really changing my opinion on this. I still think it's probably just these 3, to be honest. Okay, so would you remove the captain's armband from Messi, and if so, to who? So we'll answer the Messi question specifically, then we'll move on to captaincy in general. I can't tell you who to change it to because I don't know who's in your team, but I would look at it in that Messi only got 1 return. Is there another player in my squad that can get at least 2 returns? If so, I would probably switch because we are in the group stages, right? And I can tell you that I have done that. So I had my captain's armband on Messi. He got 6 points. Now, some people on Twitter are saying that he should be on 7 points because of shots on target. I don't know if that's true, but even if it is, I would still switch on 7 points because it's only 1 return and 1 extra point for shots on target. I think in the group stages, I'm much happier to roll the dice on captaincy. Now, it's not as easy as in Euro 2020 where we had a different captain every single day, so it was definitely worth, trying to get that big points total. But even with just 2 captains, I still think it's worth taking that bit of a risk because ultimately Brazil are going to be favourites in every game they play, and there's going to be a good chance of returns from Neymar. So can he at least match 6 or 7 points? Definitely. Does he also have a chance to get more than that? Yes. So that is why I've gone for the captain's switch, right? So I've done that. If you've got Neymar or someone else that you think can get at least 2 returns and outscore Messi, I would think about switching it. I think because we only get 1 captain swap, it's a little bit more difficult. But again, this game's supposed to be fun. We are in the group stages. I'm definitely changing all day long on 6 or 7 points. So I'll probably do that throughout the first few match days. Now, when we get to the latter stages, that's a bit different. When we're in the quarterfinals and the games are a bit tougher, if my first captain gets like 6, 7, 8 points, and I'm not that confident on the second one, I will probably stick. I would definitely stick in the semi-finals, for example. I'm pretty sure I would anyway. Might depend on what my overall rank is at that point. But in the group stages, I'm switching. So should you remove the captain from Messi? That depends who you've got. I've got Neymar. I've already switched. So there we go. Hopefully you enjoyed that video and found it somewhat useful. If you did, make sure to give it a like and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. I know videos throughout the group stages are not necessarily ideal because there's games on all day. People want to watch that. There's new information coming every single day as well. But there's really no other way to do it. As soon as match day 1 ends, match day 2 begins, and there's a whole load of other games that day as well. So I can't delay the videos any longer. So as I go through each video, I'll talk about the new information that comes comes up each day. So when we do team selection tomorrow, I'll talk about all the matches from Wednesday as well. And that's just going to be the way it is throughout the group stages. Once we get to the latter rounds, round of 16 quarterfinals, there's a bit more of a gap between when the match day ends and the next one starts. So that might be a little bit better. But right now, this is just how it is. So hopefully you're enjoying the content. If you are, hit subscribe. Make sure you've liked the video if you haven't already. And I'll catch you again tomorrow.